Thanks. I would have liked to have written something funny. But I have a hard time doing that sometimes, so it is what it is. One day back when I was 21 and just graduated from college, I decided that in order to be someone who could talk about the things that the artistic and literary people around me talked about, I had to watch A Clockwork Orange. There were people who went to movies for the violence of movies, but this was artistic violence. That somehow seemed to have an importance to it. Also, when I was a little kid, my family lived in London, so there was an element of nostalgia to it. Well, it was violent, all right, and it left me feeling awful, but I certainly couldn't argue with it. I couldn't argue with the argument that a violent society made violent individuals, even if it didn't look like a violent society outwardly, even if everybody was very clean and orderly and dead about the violence around them. Afterwards, I thought, Jesus, and how is anybody supposed to make something beautiful? But I'd watched it, and now I could participate a little better in the kinds of conversations that some of the people around me were having. But all I wanted to say if the topic of A Clockwork Orange came up was Jesus. My mother and sister had been out while I was watching it, and when they came home, my sister, who was 13, asked me what I'd watched, and I told her. She wanted to watch it. And I did something I'd never done in my life before. I told her I wasn't going to let her watch it. She looked at me with interest and surprise. This was a new thing. I'd always told her about books she ought to read and music she ought to listen to, and I'd been a general proponent of any and all of her artistic discoveries. I'd never before told her that something was off limits, and that it was specifically made off limits by me. She wasn't mad. She could see that something was happening between me and the movie. She could see that it had hit me in a way that I needed to find some new part of myself. And she knew I had a position of good standing in terms of wanting to introduce her to new things in the world. And I wasn't trying to say that she was too much of a little kid to watch it. It was just that after a movie like that, I needed to do something uncharacteristically mature, ahead of my years mature, just to maintain a little hope that it was possible to make something beautiful in a world that was in many ways similar to the world of A Clockwork Orange. It seems like it's really affected you, she said. Yes, I said. Well, she said, okay. Thanks, I said. It wasn't any fear that this marked a change in our relationship, that I was going to start disallowing her to do things left and right. It was just something I needed to do with the feeling it had given me. But afterwards, when I thought about it, I knew a little better what it was. I didn't want her to watch the rape scene. I was afraid of how that would change our relationship, to be honest. Maybe it was crazy, but I thought it would lessen the friendship between me and my sister because we'd had so many things that we had seen in the same way. But I knew that the rape scene in the movie was something that we could not see in the same way. For all I knew, she had already seen movie scenes like that. I just thought that it was enough for one of us to have watched it. And I admit that the idea of keeping my 13-year-old sister from watching something that at the time I thought of as something that happened to girls and women felt a little bit heroic to me. I don't know if it was the right thing to do or not. I do think that if I'd been honest with myself and said to her, it's too hard for me to see you watch a movie with a rape scene in it, that might have been good, because then we could have had an interesting conversation. At the time, though, I was 21, and I had just watched A Clockwork Orange, and all I wanted to do was go up to my room and look out the window at the trees and the sky and dream of how there could still be something nice in the world.